The trail that Connie had left behind itself, since Poke and Lloyd killed its owner and stole it somewhere just south of Hachita, was wandering and pretty much senseless. Up 81 to US 80, the turnpike, until Poke and Lloyd began to feel nervous. They had killed 6 people in the last 6 days, including the owner of the Continental, his wife, and his smarmy daughter. But it was not the 6 murders that made them feel angsty about being in the interstate. It was the dope and the guns. 5 grams of hash, a little tin snuff ball filled with God knew how much coke, and 16 pounds of marijuana. Welcome everyone to another installment of my Stephen King analysis series, the 5th part of my King's Algorithm series, and a great way to start 224 with one of the most common and interesting archetypes, as it's one of the very few that is almost gender-locked, that is 99% of the time is a man, and is always a villain, even turning other archetypes villainous if they get mixed up together. I'm AdalisaZ, and today we are continuing our hike through Stephen King's longest book as we meet the 5th archetype, the violent man, whose presence always brings death to those around him. In the stand, our violent man is Lloyd Henry, who may not be the most violent of Randall Flagg's followers, but he's seriously the most dangerous. So let's start 2024 by stepping on the lonely highway that is the stand. Last time we were touching the figure of authority, I pointed out that they are a character that could be either good or bad, and depending on which side they choose, they could affect the whole end result. The violent man is, in many ways, a mirror of this, as they are always under the evil umbrella, even if they think of themselves as heroes. And if the character starts as something else, say the figure of authority itself or the addict, and then they become the violent man, well, then the heroes are in big trouble. And in the one case where the artist became the violent man, there is a reason why Jack Torrance is always in the most memorable King villains list, right? That is when the fertilizer hits the fan. If you have seen my other videos on King's books, you know that King has a special thing for domestic violence. He hates it and puts it clearly in all of his books. While during his addiction years he might have tried to see it from the point of view of the abuser, like with Jack Torrance trying to justify his action, but even so knowing that he was doing something wrong, and that Wendy had all the right in the world to divorce him and never letting him die again, once he got dry, the message became much more clear. Those who abuse their families, their loved ones, are trash and do not deserve any consideration, even if they have a fruit excuse. The violent man is the embodiment of this concept. He is the archetypical macho man who thinks his wife and children must obey him at all time, with no hesitation or any attempt at disrespect. If he's not married, his girlfriend, if he has one, must understand that she's his property, and anything that shows her independence will be punished. If a child has this role, and is not the bully, the child will be also a bully, and he always treats others as their toy. And yes, the bully is a different archetype from the violent man. We will discuss him later on. As I said, there are very few women in this role, and the ones who do get in the role are usually also the fanatic. In particular, Annie Wilkes, Margaret White, and to a lesser degree, as she's never physically violent to others, Miss Carmody from The Mist. Other than them, the violent men are, well, men. They also lack imagination and creativity. The only artist who is a violent man in King's work is, again, Jack Torrance, and we are told that the less creative he is, the more violent he gets. In fact, the book he's making in The Overlook is not of his own imagination. He's only planning to copy the newspapers and journals The Overlook lets him have. In short, the violent man is there to become a servant of evil when evil comes. A dragon for the real leader, who will follow orders without any questions, as he's used to be obeyed. And why does he accept that leadership of evil? Easy. Because the violent man, above everything, believes that might means right. Finally, the violent man never believes that they are to blame for the problems. No matter what, it's always someone else who is to blame. This is very clear with Annie, as she's very adamant that it's humanity who makes her get mad, the Sikhs who made her kill them. If they hadn't been so annoying, so bratty, so mean, she wouldn't have to kill them. She says, of course, this is not true, but it's what every violent man repeats to themselves to justify their actions. And here, I have to quote Misery, because it gives us a perfect example. I killed her because she played her radio late at night. I killed her because of the dumb name she gave the cat. I killed her because I got tired of seeing her soul-kissing her boyfriend on the couch, him with his hands shoved so far up her skirt he looked like he was prospecting for gold. I killed her because I caught her cheating. I killed her because she caught me cheating. The specific don't matter, do they? I killed her because she was a cockadoo brat, and that was reason enough. And maybe because she was a Mrs. Smart Guy, Paul whispered. Misery, page 188, 199. The violent man is, more often than not, our first antagonist, if not the main one. Well, he is not the evilest person in any of King's books, that role is for the Dark Man and the Dark Man alone. Because he is the servant of evil, he is more often than not the one who's actively doing the harm to the protagonist. The exception would be Margaret White, who is all evil. Actually, in Carrie, we could argue that Billy Nolan is the violent man, but still, Margaret White. I need to talk about Margaret White soon, just about her, but that's a different story. To go back to The Shining, since Jack Torrance is a fascinating example too, the Overlook itself can't hurt Danny directly, as at the beginning, he has only the power to create images in the room, like in a book, and later on, although he can make the images look more real and actually harm Wendy, he cannot harm Danny. He needs a body. It needs Jack to do his dirty work. Leland Gaunt in Needful Things can't face Alan Pagmore. So, he's busy keeping his business secret, and he gets Ace Merrill to engage with the sheriff, and so on. This brings us to Lion Henry, the violent man in the stand. He's not the only man prone to violence in our series, as I mentioned. He's not the only violent person, if we are going to be completely honest, but he is chosen by Randall Flagg, who actually has a body to enact his evil, to be his second in command because of all the horrible violent people that survived the plague, which in my opinion were too many. Lloyd is a born follower, and more importantly, he owes Randall Flagg his life. Before he met Flagg, Lloyd was a murderer and a thief, working with his partner Poke and killing indiscriminately. But then Poke got killed and Lloyd arrested with such bad luck that he happened to be in prison in his closet jail cell when the pandemic of Captain Trips really hit. Now, I have gone on before on how King managed to make us feel bad for the worst people sometimes, and I have to say, Lloyd's experiences in jail during the Captain Trips portion of the story made me wish that not only he'd survive, but also that he'd see the error of his ways and join the good guys. Well, I got half my wish, so that's a win, I think. In prison, Lloyd is left to die alone, trapped without food or water. We follow him as he realizes that none of the prisoners is being freed, that the guards just left or probably died. He knew little about the flu and the pandemic, enough to only eat half of his meals and saving the rest for a while, but that soon was not enough, as he was the only survivor in the prison after all. All the others had either caught the flu or taken the quick exit before starvation came in. Which is why, when Randall Flagg comes and offers him the key to his jail cell, Lloyd immediately agrees to follow him to the end of the world and back. But even before Flagg, But even before the flaw, we get to know a lot about Lloyd, and the main thing is, as I mentioned before, that he's a follower and not a leader. He used to follow his partner Poke and listen to what he said even if he disagreed, but he was usually stunned out of his mind. Then he followed his lawyer's lead, as it was the only way he thought he'd beat the death penalty. But at no time at all he either took responsibility for his own acts, nor tried to act on his own. Because in the end, all Lloyd knew was violence and following orders. The Violent Man is a good example of powerless people trying to feel powerful by taking down those whom they see as weaker than them. This is of course why they are drawn so hard to evil. Evil promises them power, the power they don't have, and that is what they crave. Even when they know that they will never be as powerful as the main darkness, they still want to settle as number two. That is, the very few ones who are smart enough to realize that they are being used. Most violent men can be tricked so much that they even believe not only that they are acting on their own volition, but also that they are the ones calling the shots and that they are going to be number one at the end. When the book has a small cast, this means of course that the violent man overlaps with other archetypes. The worst case scenario is, of course, the one we see in The Shining, where the violent man is not only the addict, the fanatic, the two other biggest weapons the dark man has against the white, but also the artist. Jake Torrance is our one example of a corrupted artist, and we saw how well that went for everybody involved, including the Overlook and the good guys. A more common situation that can also have terrible consequences for the characters in the story is when the violent man is the figure of authority, as it's the case of Rose's mother and Desperation, we just saw, and will repeat itself in Bag of Bones, which is our next book to be reviewed. In those cases, the violence always comes as part of the abuse of power, because the violent man cannot be not violent, not even if he has the power and authority he craves. We will also see this in Under the Dome, when our violent man needs to be reassured constantly that he's still in charge, despite everything going on. This brings me to another point. The violent man wants to be in charge without any of the responsibility that being a leader implies. He wants to be respected and followed and admired, but without actually giving anything back. This is why he usually comes to blow with the artist, or a reasonable figure of authority, or anyone who actually wants to help and undo the evil that is going on. Because no one would mind following the violent man as long as they led them to safety somehow. But no! The violent man is not interested in the safety or the well-being of everyone. He only cares about being right and admired, and sometimes keeping the status quo. In this, Lloyd Henry is a bit of an odd duck, because while he doesn't really care for the other people in Flag's colony, and he will only follow Flag's orders no matter what, he actually does works to improve the colony's lives and realizes when things have gotten out of hand, even if he never lives for his own survival. That makes him a bit more tragic, I think, because he was the one violent man who may have had a chance to redeem himself, if not for his unending loyalty. I have to say, the violent man is one of the most enjoyable villainous archetypes in King's work because, with very few exceptions like Lloyd here, you don't have to feel conflicted about being happy for them getting their comeuppance, and they never have a real good excuse for how they are. Yes, many of them were abused as children, but other characters that have the same bad upbringing and choose not to be evil and hurt others showed that at the end, violence is a choice. And how you direct it is up to you. If you act violently and you act for evil, that's your choice. And that's a very good lesson to learn. I want to thank my dear patrons Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, Jessic, Ellie Ryder, and Greater Philip Leto, as well as my first supporter Tanya Pineda and Amy Sung, who is the best person in the universe and without whom these videos would not exist. I also want to remind you that if you want to support these and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/AdalisaZ, with a link on descriptions, as I know my name can be hard to spell. And with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos, as well as get access to a ton of art before anyone else. Or, if you prefer a one-off offer, a coffee with just one donation of $3, and you will get the mention in the next 3 videos I make. If you can't support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to other channels, and of course you sharing the links. I also welcome all your questions, feedbacks and suggestions in the comment box below. And well, although my next video will be Bag of Bones if everything goes to plan, when we come back to the stand, we will talk about the role of the dominant mother in Stephen King's novels.